Before we get started on the episode, slight update for you. We have a new website, classicalantiquitypod.com. We've moved from the old website to the new. Old website will still be there, but just go to classicalantiquitypod.com. And with that out of the way, enjoy the episode. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Classical Antiquity Sidequest, a podcast covering topics from classical antiquity. The period of time is known for, as Edgar Allan Poe put it, the glory that was Greece, the grandeur that was Rome. Our next side quest covers a lot of topics. We will discuss the current climate of higher education and how some professors may feel at the moment. We will also cover ancient Greek drinking habits. It turns out that, much like us, they like to drink. And also like us, they played their own version of drinking games. There's some sexism inherent with this, which we will also cover. And we are going to answer perhaps history's most important question. Was Odysseus a woo girl, or did he just keep it real? Our guide for this side quest is our old friend, Dr. Amy Pistone. Amy Pistone, how are you? And welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about all kinds of stuff, it sounds like.
We are going to have a lot of fun, but it's been a while since we last spoke. Our calendars have been things problematic. Tell us how last year's football season went. Were there any, muscles that said, I'm tired of this, stop? Or did you get through it okay?
No, the season went really well. It was I was an alternate on the MAC championship game, which was fantastic. They play it at in Detroit where the Lions play. They have the MAC championship game there. So I was an alternate on that game, and the season overall went really well. Nothing too big or crazy. I actually was able to avoid some of the bigger, crazier things. The rest of my crew had a 4-hour weather delay one week, but I had to swap with someone else because people have conflicts with schools that they attended. So I had a lovely time while my crew was waiting for 4 hours on thunder and lightning delays. So I actually dodged most of the bullets of games that were a little too dramatic, and overall, just a good season.
If I remember correctly, the Lions Stadium is a dome and has that like tire rubber component to it instead of natural grass. Is that right?
Yes,
Is
that is
that
correct.
better for you to run on? I mean, do you notice a difference compared to the grass? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so they say so this is Ford Field is the and they say that natural grass is easier on the body. I really like the sort of artificial turf just because uh there's no chance that you're going to turn an ankle on an uneven piece of the ground, right? Which natural grass can be a little uneven. And I'm a little bit more worried about if I'm like running backwards or having to turn around quickly and catching an uneven part of the grass. So I like it. It gets really hot if you're outside in the summer when the heat's coming down. You actually like you can feel the heat coming up from the little pebbles, like it's black rubber basically. And so if it's particularly hot, you can like feel the heat coming up through your feet, which is not the most pleasant feeling. But I think I it's nice to know exactly what you're getting with the field rather than natural grass. By the end of the season, you're starting to get a lot of areas that are a little balder. So I prefer it, but they do say that it's natural grass is easier on the body. So
Well, at my age, the fear of an ankle injury is burned into your brain.
mhm.
So I sympathize with you on that one. But let's transition from that into something associated with football. Actually, before we get into the drinking in antiquity that we're going to discuss, one thing that I wanted to talk to you about, as I think this just came down today, the Supreme Court continued its. I'm trying not to editorialize too much, but continued its profiles and cowardice, and is allowing the executive to run amok in a so-called divided government,
Mhm.
and is clawing back funding and canceling funding over DEI initiatives, which is apparently only good in the Constitution if it works for certain states to get more representation and power than they should based on their population. Constitution is actually a heavily DEI document. It's just for a different type of people, but I'll
You
save
did
that
such
for
a
another
good
day.
job of avoiding editorializing, I will say.
Well, I mean, I could go on for a long time about how the South, in and of itself, survives off political DEI policies that get it going, keep it going. But
Mhm.
I'm not going to. We'll deal with that another day. We've seen a lot of attacks on academia, on colleges, on universities. This actually has been going on for a long time with this nonsense woke mind virus. Schools are teachers are indoctrinating people, professors are indoctrinating people, a bunch of garbage like that. And I remember that the during the first Trump administration, that bill that got passed that started going after universities' endowments, trying to kind of tax these schools out of existence to some extent. Uh, and now it's gotten ramped up a lot. And with that background, I'm just curious what the vibe and mood is like for people with boots on the ground at schools. I mean, I see a lot on Blue Sky from professors, and I always try to think that social media is not real life, although sometimes I'm not sure. But if that's the case, but is there fear? Is there a code of silence that's springing up? I mean, is it really as uncharted ground as it seems from an outsider's perspective?
Yeah, unfortunately it is in a lot of ways as bad as it sounds in some contexts. There are definitely places where I think there is more cause for hope or optimism than some other folks do. But it is a really stressful and fraught time in higher ed right now. In part, as you mentioned, right, there's been funding cuts across the board. Specifically, a lot of science research funding has been really cut, which for an institution, so I teach at Gonzaga, which is a teaching forward institution. We do research, but we are not doing research on like the scope of somewhere like in the state of Washington, like UW, University of Washington has much bigger labs, and that's just a bigger part of what they do. For somewhere like Gonzaga, those cuts are in a lot of ways hitting both the research that we do, but also a lot of the research that our students get to do, because all of the funding that a lot of that funding goes into hiring people who work in the labs, whether that's undergraduate students, graduate students. And so it's directly harming not just professors, but it's directly harming students across the board. But the other big thing, like just seeing a lot of, if you had any kind of grant proposal in that had words like gender or climate or some of those words that it's just been a non-starter for a lot of grants, knowing that your grant proposal just wouldn't even get a look, has been really tough. And the sort of you see a lot of this, I don't know, sort of straw man approach to, oh, we're giving this much money to research this kind of thing. And yes, if you sort of caricature what the research is on, that, oh, we're going to see if hamsters get depressed, like that seems like a good use of our money. But at the end of the day, like this is where the research comes from that enables to help figure out how to help people who are depressed, or to help figure out, develop the new medication, make progress against cancer. Like all of those things are getting politicized in a way that is going to really, I don't think we're going to see the full effects for a while. But the other, just in terms of the sort of, I mentioned like kind of a silence or a chilling effect. And I think that that really has been a big impact of the directions that people want to go, thinking about like, what is their next research project going to be? What are they going to pursue? What are they going to do? And knowing that certain areas there is no funding and there's potentially sanctions that you are opening yourself up to if you do research that is high profile enough to get the attention of somebody, right? And so there's just kind of a lot of ways that we're seeing student protests, but also research agendas. This idea of like academic freedom. And like that has always been something that's been held really sacred in higher ed. And, you know, definitely something we say is important, and varying degrees of how much people are willing to kind of die on the hill of doing research on potentially unpopular topics. But there has been a real hesitance to pursue any kind of topic that could get you, sorry, I mean, big Lord of the Rings nerd, and like something that could kind of bring the eye of Sauron on you, right? So wanting to keep your
Yeah.
head down and not get too much attention, while also wanting to, you know, still do the work that we think is important. And so yeah, it's been humanities by and large didn't get that much funding from grant funding, federal funding stuff. So in history, classics, literature, there hasn't been that much of a cut, just because we weren't getting big grants anyway in the first place. But it is definitely something that kind of across the board, seeing departments be shut down, seeing and the part that really frustrates me particularly right now is that there's been a lot of news from states that are institutions, and in states that you would think would not be as happy to go along with some of these, like, oh, we're not going to, can't talk about gender, can't talk about race, can't talk about whatever. But this is also sort of giving a lot of institutions cover to do things they may have already wanted to do in terms of cutting budgets, cutting departments, cutting faculty, in terms of kind of like maximizing profit in higher ed. And so institutions that should not be doing that, and I think before wouldn't have thought they could get away with that, but University of Oregon and the University of Washington both announced some pretty big cuts this week. And
Virginia Tech did too. Yeah. Well, I don't know if
yeah,
they announced it, but
I saw from someone in the like works on ancient history at Virginia Tech as well. Yeah, and you know, some of these, I mean, Virginia is politically complicated, but I mean, Oregon and Washington are deep blue states. And I think having the excuse that, oh, funding is being cut because of federal actions has also allowed people to try and push for things that they may have wanted to cut anyway. And I think that that's an extra layer of it being like pretty disheartening to try and get ready for the school year while all of this is going on.
well, in the part that I find problematic, well, not the part, there are a lot of parts, but let
A
me
part.
let me be a little more precise. One of the parts that I find problematic is it's all done under the guise and the lie that we're trying to bring back academic freedom. But what's really happening is this nonsense, America first, American exceptionalism, uh, manifest destiny stuff is being forced down our throats. And I try not to editorialize too much on this podcast. It's hard to do that though in this topic because the thing about it is this whole America's great and it's always perfect and there's no problems with it. Yet we're going to cut studies into we're going to cut back on things that deal with gender, things that deal with hard, solid DEI issues, things that look at folks who have been excluded from the narrative of this country and the narrative of history for a long time. And when you see that happening, you just have to say to yourself, well, wait a minute. These people, and I grew up with a lot of folks who were, you know, the overlooked working man, downtrodden folks, the overlooked, mistreated working class. That's where I grew up. And if America was so great for everybody all the time at all moments, why is populism such a powerful driving force about stopping you from getting cheated? I'm the guy who can come in and fix it, right? If America was the way that these people who are making these cuts or, you know, leading it at the top of the administration want you to think about it, they would never be able to ride this wave of populism into power in the first place.
Yeah, I think, and this is, I mean, one of the things that comes up so much with the study of history, right? That like their history is always a, like the study of history, historiography, how we write history, how we tell history is always a selection of facts and detail, right? We're always crafting a narrative of, we can't include everything in any given story. So like what things do we focus on? What things do we look at? What things do we pay attention to? And if you want to tell a story that leaves out any time that America did something bad, like you have to leave out a lot of other stories because and this came up with this attacks on the Smithsonian recently. Like, you can't talk about the triumphs of freed slaves, formerly enslaved people, and how impressive it was what they went on to do after slavery ended, or what are these massive accomplishments during the civil rights era if there was nothing wrong to begin with, right? Like, you
Right.
can't talk about the like all of the things that I think are legitimate, really good, important moves forward that this country has made, if you have to start from a place of we never did anything wrong. We were never imperfect in our achieving our goals, right? Like, all right, like the ideals that we say we stand for are really good and important. And the idea that we have always been falling short, but we're trying, we're getting closer, and that our history is a story of like trying with fits and starts, and but trying to give more people the rights that we said that we cared about for everybody. Like that is in fact, I think, a very like optimistic patriotic story of American history, but it also takes into account all of the things, like the places that this country has fallen short, the people who didn't get, like, you can't talk about the accomplishments of the labor movement if you don't recognize that like
Exactly.
there were people who owned the railroads and people who owned the mines were
Right.
actually bad. They were exploiting people, they were taking advantage of people, and we have these populist heroes who rose up. But if you never think that the government or wealthy people were ever taking advantage of anyone, and if you never get to learn about the ways that that happened, then you never get to learn about the triumphs of labor, of organized labor, right? Like, it's such an impoverished view of
Well,
history.
how could you teach a course about Eugene Debs and everything he went through and the race issues that were tied into the union movement during that
Right.
era without talking about how we got there? And I just find it so absurd. I took some labor history courses in college, so you're really speaking my language now. Um, I don't want to go off on too much further of a tangent, but um, how in the world can you teach everything like you just pointed out that all these people accomplished without understanding how we got there? I mean, history is messy. It's always been messy. There's always these complicated elements to it. I know Zachary Hertz, who you know, was on
Yeah.
Emperors of Rome recently,
Mhm.
and he did an episode about false Neros. And one of the points he made was we've all looked at Nero as this total piece of garbage, awful guy, but at the same time, he couldn't, there had to be something to him. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been these false Neros who kept showing up and getting
Right.
support, right? So the point there is, and I think you're saying the same thing, there is an inherently subjective element of recounting our history because we're making value judgments when we decide what we want to talk about. I'm making a value judgment when I say, who do I want to have on the podcast, or what article do I want to reach out to this scholar about, right? That's a
Right.
value judgment that I'm making, right? And so it becomes incumbent upon the historians to say, and then here's the other side of the story. Here's the other context of that. And that's why I like to have people, who are experts like yourself on, so that we can fill those things in and have those conversations. But we're not doing anybody any favors if we just act like history is not messy. I mean, how are you going to look at the original Constitution that says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but 3/5 of all other persons? Who are those other people? Why aren't
Yeah.
they counted the same? What are we talking about? Why does the U.S. Constitution not mention slavery? Right?
Yeah. I mean,
I
nothing
mean,
about the Constitution makes sense if you aren't thinking about it in against the backdrop of slavery. Like, there's so many things about how the Constitution was constructed that like bits and pieces and hints and like, the ghost of slavery is all over that, even though like they're not talking about it in those terms, but like so many of the decisions and the compromises and things, like, you can't really understand what went into making that document and making decisions about how power will be balanced and who gets power and how the states will interact with one another. Like, you none of that really makes that much sense if you just omit slavery. Like, you can't do that without, there's just a gaping hole where there should be like a really significant influence of slavery in how the power balance of the early United States and the colonies was being negotiated.
right. Right. No, and it's just this whole idea that there's just one narrative and everybody was great and they were perfect. I mean, they're all they're all the founding fathers were men. They were flawed, they made mistakes, they did things wrong, and the Constitution is a compromise document. It's not an expression of pure ideals. It was by its nature a compromise. Read A Miracle at Philadelphia. It's a great book, written by a woman. It may not be okay right now. I don't know. We'll see. But
I don't know if I'm allowed to recommend books written by women. We'll see by the time this comes out if you're still allowed to do that.
who knows? But I mean, it just this whole thing is just unsettling for many reasons. But there are solutions to things that are unsettling. I have it on good authority that drinking is
Oh, look at that segue.
the cause of and solution to all of life's problems. And while unhealthy and dangerous at times, it can help you forget about the stress of life and the militarized presence in DC. So, were the Greeks? I was just in Northern Virginia. I don't know when this is going to air, but I was just in Northern Virginia and saw, you know, National Guard people getting coffee in the morning before going to stand around and look at their phones. Anyway, um, I understand that the Greeks were aware of alcohol's power to make them forget things. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely accurate. And what a beautiful segue there. Just stuck the landing. No, so I mean, drinking was a huge part of ancient Greek culture. In some ways, there's parts that like look familiar to us as modern people when we think about drinking events, but also just a lot more pervasiveness of not drunkenness per se, but that alcohol is really a big part, whether that's ritual libations, whether that's keeping in mind that drinking water is not particularly clean. There's just a much bigger
No
presence of
modern day
alcohol.
parallels for that either, which is good.
Look, if the water starts getting less safe to drink, I think the only solution is to have a little bit of alcohol all the time. That's scientifically that might be the only option.
I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is in favor of that, so we'll go with it. Give it a
um,
week, man.
yeah, no,
Anyway,
it's been quite a week news wise to see,
right.
more and more of our institutions crumbling. But again, what a great time to be thinking about drinking
Correct.
in light of all of that. But no, it is really interesting. We see in a lot of literature that the Greeks do frame this as like Dionysus as the representation of the god of a lot of things, but among those things, wine and theater and revelry and all sorts of different stuff. But Dionysus and Demeter, which associated with grain, crops, agriculture, like those are the two great gifts to mankind, right? The food that you need and alcohol, which is often described in terms of helps you sleep. That's great, and helps you forget how depressing the world is. And that is one of the greatest gifts that the gods ever gave to humanity is a liquid that can help you sleep and forget how bad things are.
So, when people think of drinking in ancient Greece, they probably do think of Dionysus, but also hedonism bot from Futurama, which is crucial.
Right.
And remember his great phrase, I apologize for nothing. Uh, Man, I gotta have to watch that episode now. But uh, you talked about the things that Dionysus was associated with: theater, drinking, like random parties. Like, was this more like Dionysus was the god of like having a good time, like living the high life, the ancient living the high life, or what? How did that play out?
Yeah. So a lot of our Greek gods, you can kind of put all the things they represent neatly into one box, more or less. That I don't know, Demeter's earth and crops that grow out of the earth. And right there's a lot of where you can kind of put them neatly in a box. And Dionysus is one of the hardest to put into a box of any sort. Just because, so I mentioned, right, you've got theater, which can be rowdy, but not necessarily. Right, he's the god of both comedy and tragedy, and the less talked about satyr plays, which are their whole own thing. Um, but he's also the god of, among other things, transformation. He shapeshifts. He changes other people's shapes, like he turns people into animals. There's one of my very favorite vase paintings is there's actually several different depictions of this, that Dionysus in the story, he's looking very beautiful and he gets kidnapped by pirates who don't know that he's a god. And he is on this boat and he transforms into a lion, and everyone is very scared because there's suddenly a lion, and then vines and grapes and things start sprouting all over the boat, and all the men get very scared because something weird is happening, and also there's a lion on their boat, and they all jump overboard and he turns them into dolphins. And so yeah, it's like it's a
You can't see
very,
my face, but I'm understanding why Dionysus is associated with drinking now. This is all checking out. I get it.
yeah, so there
This
is,
is like
right,
Vegas. This is like Vegas. Like whatever
there is an
happens there.
aspect of like things, both people not perceiving things correctly, right? And you can see how alcohol, or sometimes we talk about it more in terms of like intoxication. It's a big question that I don't want to go down this rabbit hole about, like how much there was drug use in the ancient world, and people have their own theories, and some of it gets real wacky. It's a big can of worms to open up, um, but when we talk about like Dionysus as being this sort of stepping outside of your normal state of being, right? So that can be these like transformations kind of fit in that ballpark, but also drunkenness, right? You're kind of stepping out of your sobriety, your right mind, and depending how drunk you are, you might start seeing things that don't, you might start seeing double, things might get blurry. So like there's this, a lot of stories where people will be seeing things that don't seem to be true. So he's maybe causing hallucinations. Like it's hard in our literary accounts because you have someone who is clearly something's going on, right? Like he's seeing things that no one else is seeing as a result of Dionysus, which you can kind of read as like, okay, well, if you have way too much to drink, you're seeing things that no one else is seeing. You're seeing that the walls are a little fuzzy. You're seeing, whatever that is. You can't see the letters of the thing you're trying to read if you're too drunk. So there is that kind of aspect. But theater is like a different type of stepping out of yourself, right? It's sort of you're inhabiting a role. You're
You may
becoming
need to be
someone
drunk
else.
to enjoy the theater.
Some people, hypothetically, people who, when they're not working on sports and drinking, are primarily Greek tragedy scholars, don't have to be drunk. But if it doesn't hurt if you
What
want to have a glass of wine at your
what
at
if
your
the
performance.
actors are really bad?
Well, that is true.
Because
Some
I found some college film projects that we did and had them digitized, and one of them I apologize for. Unlike Hedonism Bot, I don't know what the hell we were trying to do with it, but whatever it was, we didn't achieve that at all, and I
I,
apologize for that.
God bless, have not been able to go back and look at a lot of film projects from, I think I still have a VHS of one project that we did in high school that was, at the time, I was very proud of. I think I'm better off not seeing it now in retrospect. It was a retelling of the Wife of Bath's tale from the Canterbury Tales, and I think at the time we thought it was great. So I know I kept the VHS because of that. But um, anyway, so to to kind of get back to your question from a while ago, um, Dionysus is this like complicated, because like he's around a lot of revelry, but like if you're doing it right, like you need some Dionysus in your life, and it goes very badly if you reject Dionysus. Every mythological story we have, if you reject Dionysus, you are going to have a terrible end. But at the same time, if you willingly, like if you are like, hey, it's time for some Dionysus, it's time for some party, it's time for letting some steam off, it's time for everything in moderation, and sometimes it's time to have a bowl or two of wine with your friends. um the results seem to be fine. Like it's good and it's healthy and it's expected. And the problem comes when you don't recognize that that is an important part of life, right? You can't be like logic and reason and I don't know, you know, Plato and philosophy. Like you can't be that all the time. There needs to be a time for cavorting with your friends and drinking and listening to music and dancing around. That like that is an integral part of life. And it doesn't have the same sort of like I think we put that kind of behavior in like, you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's, you know, but it's like misbehaving. It's bad. It's a little like, you know, you don't want your parents to know that you were out getting hammered on a Saturday night necessarily. And I don't see a lot of that in our Greek sources about like if you're doing this correctly, if you're not going overboard, if you're not getting into trouble, there is an amount of getting like a good amount drunk. And like you should be doing that. It is in fact like appropriate behavior to get like the right amount of drunk from time to time.
Yeah. So suck it, teetotalers.
Exactly. That's what I've
That
always said.
right. So that's their approach. But one of the things that when I was preparing for this, I looked up your course syllabus. I did some research. I listened to some of your podcast appearances, and I think you mentioned some of this last time. Symposiums.
Yeah.
Um, these things sounded crazy, and I couldn't tell if they were like just like kind of an eyes wide shut thing, which might be a dated reference here. Uh, although I don't think my audience skews young, but whatever. Um, I also couldn't tell if it were just like a bunch of nerd parties, like in The Simpsons when Bart became a nerd and he's with Nelson, with Martin and all those guys, Excelsior. I couldn't, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And
Yeah.
you raised the topic, and I do want you to explain what symposiums were for the audience. But it sounded like there may have been different social class levels of
Mhm.
hierarchies of partying. And I'm curious about that as well. So could you define what symposiums were, and were there like low rent fighting outside of the bowling alley style symposiums?
So yeah, I'll start with what a symposium was, but our evidence is a little mixed on the were there fights outside the bowling alley kind of symposia.
I'm not
But
knocking bowling. I'm just saying fighting outside the bowling alley. You get what I'm saying.
yeah, I as someone who has spent some of my favorite evenings in absolute dive bars, I am I'm not going to disparage, you know, dive bars and bowling alleys and things, but yeah, so I will say that some of this, and I will, in the interest of being a good scholar, I will flag when we are into things that are not necessarily well agreed upon. Because there are things here that are definitely kind of my own interpretations. And one day maybe I'll finally get my I've been wanting to work on some sort of article that kind of puts all this in one place, because then I could just tell people like, but no, it's been peer reviewed, so you have to agree with me now. um, but so
You
some of
could
this
just
is my
make it up. You could just say it's peer reviewed. We're kind of in a post-truth world. I mean, really, what does it matter?
I mean, yeah, I would like to have some people sign off on that they officially agree with this. I feel
I
like it like
agree
gives
with
me
you.
more legitimacy when I'm like, let me tell you, you know, because some of these are, this is the kind of thing I always, okay, so I am not the best reader of Greek in the whole world. There are people in the UK, they start reading Greek so much earlier. Like there are people who are far better philologists that can really like their grasp of all of the nuances of every dialect of Greek is better than me, no question. And in the world of like drinking and drinking games, I'm far from the best at this. But in that intersection, in that Venn diagram, like I think I am actually fairly high up that list of my my knowledge of Greek and my knowledge of drinking games and activities. And I do think a lot of our scholarship on this topic has been deficient because the people that are really good at reading Greek lyric poetry have not played enough beer pong to have like a real grasp on some of that interpersonal dynamics that happen in the context of a game where you're drinking with your friends, and how all of those little things are worked out. So when I say some of this is my own interpretation, like I think I have something valuable to add from having, played a decent number of drinking games in my day. So a symposium literally just means like the sim means with, and the posium means is to do with drinking, like potent potables, that thing. Pose is just a variant on that. And so like it's just a drinking together, which always surprises students who are used to a symposium being a different word for like an academic conference. I'm like, well, it is now, but originally it's just a drinking together. Um, and so most of our texts that describe symposia are, well, most of our texts that describe anything are from elite authors. And so we're getting one perspective on how this kind of stuff would have worked. One of our sources that people go to all the time is Plato. Plato is not a reliable source about well, there's a variety of reasons. I have my own beef with Plato in
Well, you're
general.
writing about drinking, so I assume he was drunk, so he's gonna,
Well,
right?
yeah. So this is where it gets complicated, right? So he tells the story of Socrates at a symposium. And we have a similar text written by somebody else, Xenophon, who tends to be a little less literarily ambitious, maybe. Like his style is a little more simple, more straightforward, and he doesn't seem to be embellishing quite the way that like Plato is really using Socrates as a vehicle to tell stories he wants to tell, especially as Plato's writing career goes on. And so Xenophon's version of Xenophon's version of Socrates was at a symposium looks nothing like the version that Plato gives us. And so everyone reads Plato's version and thinks that this is how this party would have worked. And what Plato tells us is these guys all get together and it's a whole group of people, friends of Socrates. And Agathon was a playwright who had just won the night before or yesterday or whatever, had just won this big competition. So they're going to have a party to celebrate. So they all go over to the party and they're deciding how much they're going to drink. And the guys make a very specific point of, well, the heavy drinkers in the group are still hungover from last night because they went real hard last night. So they're still hungover. And the rest of us can't keep pace with them in terms of drinking anyway. So what if we take it easy on the drinking? That way everybody is gonna, the hungover guys will be feeling better and the guys that can't drink as much. And then instead we'll go around and we'll all give speeches in praise of love. And so they like, this is not, and there's a lot of places where Plato, like the characters in Plato's story,
It's a real boring drinking game.
it's a boring drinking game. And there is no way that people would off the cuff, like there's just so many places where like Plato's even like winking at the reader. Like clearly this didn't happen. Like clearly there's anachronisms, there's all kinds of things in his telling of the story that should make us question if this is really a thing that happened or this is him imagining what a party would have been like. Also, he was too young to have, like Plato was not an attendee at this. So at best, we're getting a story that someone told someone, right? But they also like make a point of, hey, let's not do the stuff that everyone normally does at a party. Let's get rid of entertainment. Let's get rid of this. Let's not drink too much. And so like this source that people always go to for what was a symposium like is intentionally and even like tells us this is not what a normal party was like. This is a special philosopher party. This is the nerd
thrilling.
Party.
Right.
So a normal party is you all go into it's a room that's called like an androne, the room of the men. And you around the corners of the room, there would be couches, basically. Clean is the fancy word for it, but just couches around the end. So everyone's kind of like leaning on their arms, like on couches. And you would have, generally speaking, it varies, and our sources a little iffy about like how standard all of this stuff was, but somebody gets to be the Lord of the Cups who decides what the mix of wine to water is going to be. So you have a big mixing bowl and you mix some ratio of wine to water. 2-to-1 is pretty standard, but so you mix it up. How many glasses are we drinking and how strong will the drinks be? And then you have, everyone's like laying around and you're going to be talking. You generally would have entertainment. So um, people, you get like a clown's not quite the right word. Like we usually translate it as clown, but it's not really a clown. It's more of like a, I don't know, something in like a comic, but not quite that. Something that's supposed to like somebody who's there to make you laugh. You get like acrobatics, so people could come and like do flips and stuff. And then we have women who would come and play the flute. And there's a big debate about how much like women playing the flute is like a euphemism maybe for sex workers, or maybe they're available for sex. A lot of them were enslaved, so they don't really get a lot of say if someone. So there's a lot of
We're
debate
not
about.
supposed to use that word in this era, I don't think. Slave. We got to cut that.
Well, yeah, we're not allowed to talk about the
I'll
history of
take care.
slavery anymore.
Yeah,
So
I'll
yeah,
cut that in
you cut
post.
that for.
Yeah.
Um, but so there's a lot of debate about the the flute players and how much they are there to play music versus how much they are there to be available for sex. But so there'd be like entertainment of that sort going on. And then we also have a sort of different types of games that people would play. So we've got basically like there's two types of drinking games that are like I generally class them into two categories. We have the physical ones, which is like your beer pong type games. So it's called Kataboss is the type of game this is, and there's two versions. There's one where basically you have a pole. It's got decorations and things on it, but you basically have like a tall pole, and you balance something on the top of that pole. And the the players in the game take their cups that have a little bit of wine in it, and you're trying to throw your wine. It might be lees, like the schmutz at the bottom of a glass of wine. The terminology is a little vague on this, but you would put something in your cup and you throw it at the plate type thing that's balanced on top. And the goal is you want to knock it off, but it has to hit. There's another thing on the way down. So you can't just wing the wine at this and like send it flying across the room. You need to have kind of a delicate arcing throw to knock it off, but it has to fall basically straight down. So that's one type of kataboss. The other type of kataboss, you get a basically like imagine like a large jug or like a plastic garbage can filled with water is basically like if I were recreating this now, it would be something of that sort. It's called floating kataboss. And so you'd put little saucers in a jug full of water. And you're trying to, this is very much like Battleship, a little bit Battleship maybe, but mostly beer pong. So you're trying to throw the stuff in a way that is going to sink a saucer. And so you are taking turns throwing things, trying to get enough on the little saucer to sink it.
Did the janitor come by afterwards and just curse up a storm? That seems like the messiest, most disastrous type of party you could have.
Yeah, so I have big plans to the other types of drinking games. I have done some like experimental recreation with. We just got some like 3D printing stuff that is very available to faculty to use at Gonzaga. So I will be printing up a lot of these types of vases now, and having people try out these games in more experimental ways. But yeah, I'm not doing that inside my house. Like that is an outside activity but they would do it inside. And the best part, so the room, like imagine most of our recreations, just based on the archaeological evidence, it's sort of imagine like a big sea, and there's like it's a big sea of couches along. So there's like one open spot where you go in and out of the room, and the rest is all the walls are all lined with couches that people are on. So no matter where you are throwing from, with a very narrow gap, everywhere else, there are people on the other side of it. So like it's not just going to be the floor is a mess. Like the people are getting hit. Like you are throwing, there's no way you don't hit people in this.
Literally everything is lava in this situation.
Yeah. Like just, I mean, incredibly messy. So this is, I do have plans before too long to, figure out a way to do some test play. Probably
It's
not with
like,
students.
yeah, it's like the old Gallagher comedy
Mhm.
specials without the stuff to cover yourself.
Yeah. Basically everyone is in the splash zone at all times. Yeah.
Wow. That's
So
crazy. And they thought this was a good idea. I mean, wait, like, I how did this continue itself? It seems miserable.
well, so I will say we don't know exactly how broadly this was played. Because we have little like our references are very much in passing in the same way that if we were talking about high class literary records. Like you're not going to get a manual of beer pong in an archive of the New Yorker, probably, right? And since so much of our evidence, so basically where we get a lot of our information is references in comedy or in poetry that's sort of like lyric poetry. So you get love poems and other types of poems. Um, it was allegedly, as the story goes, it was invented in Sicily, and like as we have references back to like the 500s BCE. And so it it shows up in our sources. I don't think we have much to tell us how commonly this was played, but we do have things that survive from the, and we have a ton of images that survive on vase paintings. Like they, there are so many pieces of like surviving pottery that have pictures of people playing this game. So basically what you do, just to give you a little more of a picture. So what you use for this is it's a cup called a kylix. And it is, it's sort of like a saucer, like a very shallow bowl that has a stand on the bottom. And then it's got handles on the side, like two ear handles on the side. And so basically what you do is you put one finger through one of the handles and then you sort of just like, you hang on to the cup. Thankfully, that's one less mess to worry about. But you kind of throw it from the finger and you just kind of wing it. And we have a lot of this in vase painting. Like we can see pictures of this happening. And it's, you know, so one imagines it's got to be, at least at the very least, it's got to be common enough that people know what this is when they see pictures of it, because it was very popular on vases.
So I'm just curious who was allowed to attend these things. It sounded like predominantly a male thing, and that checks intellectually because I can just see the wife of the house being like, "You did what? No, we're not doing this again."
So I hear that. We have, okay, so this gets into another like complicated
I mean,
question
I
of,
have a 16-year-old son. This is like something that he and his friends would do. And like the
yeah.
girls are like, "You are idiots. Stop."
Yeah, I mean, so two things. One, we do have vases that have women playing this. Um, they may, a lot of them are naked, which would mean that they might be sex workers, just because women, proper women are not depicted in the nude. So they might be sex workers. It, in some ways, might be more of like, I don't know, sort of like pinup girl kind of posters of like, you know, when we're all hanging out and playing this game, we have our cups that we use that have pictures of sexy women with no clothes on, also playing the game we're playing. So like how much weight we can put on this is unclear. But we
So it
do
could have been
have,
like posters that people have in their rooms
yeah.
as
So it,
opposed to actual women that are there.
yeah. So we don't, but like we definitely we do have, we have vases that show women playing this game, and then how much weight we give that as evidence, hard to say. But so yeah, there absolutely is that aspect. Um, the other, like some of the rowdier behavior, I realize this sounds like very messy and chaotic. Some of what I would describe as the rowdier behavior, we only see men depicted in vase paintings of this. And so there's a, after the drinking party has ended, there, it's called a komos. It's a there's like a special name for the, after you get drunk and you want to like go walk around in town, just kind of go on a drunken walkabout to go say hi to your friends and whatnot. Um, and the vase paintings of that are, I realize like trying to describe pictures in an audio medium is ill conceived here, but I can send you many of these pictures if you know, there's a
Please.
way to put them to go out with so people can take a look at them. But we have these just delightful vases of young men who, they might be dancing or they might be stumbling. It's hard to tell if they're,
It's a fine
but
line.
it's, yeah, it's in that ballpark, and it seems to be these young men doing their like drunken post-party parade through town.
Oh, like we're going streaking from old school.
Well, maybe, or more like the sort of I don't like schools that have like a big frat row, and like there's kind of the like we got good and drunk and like let's walk down the street and see what's going on over it, or the other a bar with a lot of streets and or a street with a lot of bars in a college town. It's not so much I mean they definitely do get into more like we're going streaking kind of trouble. It seems as though the so during the Peloponnesian War, there's there's a mutilation of the Herms is this whole big thing, and people have gone and messed with these Herm statues that are it would have the head of Hermes, or sometimes it's someone else, and then there's a phallus, like it's just like a stone column, but it has a carved dick sticking out of it. And so these statues, which are like they're supposed to like keep away bad luck, they mark boundaries. One night, probably after a fair bit to drink, possibly Alcibiades was responsible for this. There's a lot of like we don't know for sure. But anyway, the Herms get mutilated, and so I would say that there is evidence that sometimes people get into let's say property damage kind of trouble. But there's also just the part where like, I don't know, sometimes you're drunk and you like to go walk across town and see your friend and see what they're up to.
Is the place I went to law school, there were a lot of drunken public charges. And I was on the honor council, so I was an honor advocate, sort of like being a public defender, but through the school, and that's bringing back some memories now. Two things I wanted to follow up with you on. I came across this line kind of describing how drinking can go out of hand at these, and I say line, it's like a paragraph, but it's describes drinking and then drinking too much. For sensible men, I prepare only three. Is it craters or?
Yeah,
Okay,
I say craters, but it's
craters.
fine.
All right.
Craters is fine.
One for health, which they drink first, the second for love and pleasure, and the third for sleep. That's creepy in this context as I'm reading this out loud. After the third one is drained, wise men go home. The fourth is not mine anymore. It belongs to bad behavior. The fifth is for shouting. The sixth is for rudeness and insults. And this goes back to the back alley fighting that we were talking about earlier. The seventh is for fights. The eighth is for breaking the furniture. The ninth is for depression. The 10th is for madness and unconsciousness. That is a hell of an evening.
Yeah, it's like so because yeah, I think you sort of see this like okay, after like 3 drinks, people who know what's good for them, they go home, they call it a night. From that point onward, it's going to get increasingly bad decisions, right? You're gonna be getting in fights, you're gonna be breaking things, you're gonna be you might have like a real sad drunk. You might like so yeah, there's definitely this idea of like there's the right amount to drink. And if you're like I don't know, someone who's got their shit together in a general sense, like you have a nice amount to drink and then you go home and you're fine the next day. If you're the kind of person who's always having 7, 8, 9, it is frowned upon socially in some ways, and you're probably a known problem.
Yeah, you're
Um,
drunk dialing your ex and all those sorts of
exactly. Yeah,
things. Right.
that's in the ninth when you hit depression. Like that's the sad drunk dialing your ex. That's the.
Even the ancients knew that.
Uh-huh.
God bless them.
In some ways they're just like us.
Right. Now the 10th is for madness and unconsciousness. Now this ties in well to the question that I wanted to ask you earlier about Odysseus. Okay. This ties into this. It occurred to me, I'll just ask you, is Odysseus a woo girl? Okay. And I say that let's go back to his interaction with the Cyclops. Okay. And there's this line, when we were twice as far as before, I wanted to shout again to Goggle Eye, although my comrades all round tried to coax me not to do it. And then he does it anyway, right?
Mhm.
We've all had that friend. You're trying to leave, you're trying to get them out of the bar, and they're like, I just want to drink, I'm not leaving. And you're like, we really need to get out of here, right? And so I'm just asking, should we view Odysseus as an ancient woo girl?
So I really thought when you told me you were getting out your copy of the Odyssey and Cyclops and things, I really thought you were going to talk about how they get the Cyclops drunk. Because like I have many thoughts about that. Is Odysseus a woo girl? So like the thing is he's presumably not drunk then, which I feel like a big part of being a woo girl is that it's like drunk party behavior. Um, I do think so. Like I
He
would
fell
say,
asleep a lot though at key moments.
I mean, yes, but I have to. Okay, this is like a whole other conversation about. I don't know that he really is like falling asleep at all these key moments. Like I would argue that in some ways that lets him off the hook for like he just happens to always be asleep when things go wrong, and there's no one there to corroborate his story. So like he needs a convenient excuse for how things went wrong that wasn't his fault, and he just happens to be asleep a lot when this stuff goes wrong because if he was in charge, if he was on watch, like that's would never have happened. But the second he falls asleep just for a second, his men get out of line, and that's why they all die. And it's not really his fault if you think about it. Like
Right.
I think it's an awfully convenient excuse.
Right.
So I don't know that we should attribute that to his drinking or lack thereof. I do just because like I got my hopes up that we were talking about the Cyclops in a different drinking related context. The whole so like he gets to the island of the Cyclops, right? And they're these like pastoral people, they have no agriculture. And with no agriculture, they don't have wine, right? The Cyclops drinks milk and eats like cheese and meat and stuff, but there's no agriculture. They're like a pre-agricultural society. And as part of that, like the Cyclops does not know how to drink properly. And you see, like the reason that he gets so drunk that he passes out, that he can be blinded, is it's very strong wine, and he in an absolute like this is such poor form. He doesn't cut his wine with water, and that's something that, in a lot of ways, like this, you have to cut your wine with water. This is, and I put this in like heavy scare quotes, but like barbaric behavior. This is what like uncivilized people do. And so the fact that he does not know about wine, like all of these are indicators of him not being like a civilized person, which like in some ways, I think Odysseus would like us to think like I'm kind of allowed to like he's not really human. He's not really like someone that I can't, I roll up to this island. I demand that people give me presents for no clear reason. Like I want to get some more gold. And all of these bad things happen. Like I think a lot of this we're seeing little bits and pieces of like it's because the Cyclops doesn't know how to drink. Like he gets too drunk, he passes out, and bad things happen. If he knew how to cut his water with wine instead of drink this super strong wine straight, none of this would have happened. So isn't it kind of the Cyclops' fault? Like it's the men's fault, it's the Cyclops' fault. It's always somebody else's fault with Odysseus.
But here's the thing. Here's why I say he's a woo girl. Okay. Just follow me on
Okay,
this.
okay.
His people say, foolhardy man, why do you want to provoke the madman? Just now he threw something to seaward of us and drove back the ship to land, and we thought all was up with us. And if he had heard one of us speaking or making a sound, he would have thrown a jagged rock and smashed our timbers and our bones to smithereens. He throws far enough. All right. We've all had a similar conversation with that to a friend at some point, right? Like you need to stop drinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've had enough. Then Odysseus says, but I was determined not to listen and shouted again in my fury. And then he says who he was. And then what
Mm-hmm.
happens? It sets them all off on this bad journey that keeps him away from home, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a dumbass here for sure.
Right.
I am I think this comes down to you and I having a different picture in our heads of what a woo girl, like what constitutes woo girl behavior.
Correct. I agree with your point there. I think that that's well taken. So could he have been like the inspiration, like an OG proto form of woo girl behavior, right? I'm just saying spiritually he's there,
No, like
right?
he is someone who
Spiritually,
he doesn't know when to stop. I
right.
would say this strikes me a little bit more as the kind of you're at a bar and someone says something and like you tell your friend like dude just walk away like it's not worth it
He's
and
the
he's
I
like no
keep
no
it
no
real guy.
yeah like I think he's that guy more here
I see that.
and he's like look dude I'm just saying like no one needs to just say we don't need to keep it real we don't need to just say we need to walk over here and drink our beer and not start shit with a much larger guy at the bar.
So everybody stop listening for a minute and go watch the Dave Chappelle When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong skits. That's
Yeah.
it. See, you've taught me that because in my mind, he was this like woo girl, but now I get it. He's a
No,
keeping
I
it
think
real
he's a
goes
keeping it
wrong.
real. Yeah. I
Okay.
think he's the proto keeping it real guy.
Okay. Yeah. I'm feeling that. Yeah. I'm 100% with that. That is perfect. We have solved that mystery now. One of the things that I did want to ask you about, though, make sure that we covered it related to uh, women and whether they had similar
Mhm.
things to this, and whether we have any idea, to your point about if there's enough of these artifacts that survive that show these representations. It seems like it must have been somewhat widespread that these symposiums would happen or these drinking games would happen.
Yeah, so I tend to think, and there are people who disagree with me on this, but I tend to think that there were similar events for women. And we don't have firm evidence for this, but I think we have some visual evidence and like there are a couple go-to stereotypes that show up in Greek comedy and things for women, but one of them is like women be drinking. Like women love to drink. They will do anything for some wine, like the sort of if you want to talk about modern archetypes, like wine moms. Like they love their wine. They need their Chardonnay all day. Um, and so like that kind of it seems odd to me that your stereotype is women are constant and we have like hilarious pictures of like a woman who's like running and drinking from a giant like container of wine. There's plays that like the whole plot point revolves around like these women doing anything to save this wine skin so that they can like protect their wine. And
There
so
are no new original thoughts ever. This is
no,
just
we're
all
just
derivative. Yeah.
yeah, there's God, there was a I think it was a video essay years ago, like everything is a remix that like really stuck with me because it was like the first time I'd seen someone really lay out how much like, well, this is kind of like that, which is kind of like that about how like we're all just a giant web of remixed influences and versions of the same, this story but twisted a little bit, this story but add in this other one that we've already seen, but when you put them together, it's different. But yeah, so I think women would have been having their own parties. I think we have little circumstantial evidence that supports that idea. We also, I think there is evidence to suggest that uh, in military contexts, there's poetry that is associated with like symposia that has real military themes, and that I think some of it, again, it's all very circumstantial, but I do think that we would have seen similar parties, maybe not with all of the same accoutrement, like the special room just for it and all of the equipment for these different drinking games and things. But I do think that we would have seen similar type things for people of different classes, people for women, because you know women women do not come to the symposium, or proper free respectable women do not come to the symposium. Um, but I think it's very plausible that you have your dinner, the men go off and have their little party, and the women could just as easily be having their own drinking parties. Like I'm arguing mostly from a lack of evidence either way. Like it's very circumstantial what we have. But I also just think that given how women are portrayed in other contexts and given the kind of when women are together, which is largely for festivals, there's a lot of festivals that only women go to, and like that's a chance that a lot of women can get together outside of the house together. There's a lot of that is a time when you eat and drink at festivals and things. And so anyway, I think there's reasonable evidence to suggest that women were having versions of this as well. So this is not just an elite male thing, but the only like very detailed layout kind of stories that we have are predominantly elite men. And on rare occasion, there might be a token woman there, depending on there's a work by Plutarch where the banquet of the seven sages, and there's one token woman who gets to be there.
So, did they play at these symposiums an ancient form of Flipadelphia? Yes or no? Because I sure hope so.
I think I think Cottabas is not necessarily Flipadelphia, but I do think that it is very close to a lot of the physical kind of drinking games that we see. So the throwing something, flipping something, hitting something. One of my favorite. So Kylix, right, is this cup that you use. We have this weird artifact that is it's this kind of cup, but it doesn't have a foot. It doesn't have a base that it sits on, so it would be completely useless as a cup. The bottom just looks like a top, like a top that you spin. And the part that I think is amazing, so the best interpretation that anybody has of what this is that it's a custom cup for Cottabas. So you could imagine like if somebody has their own special ping pong balls or cup that they use for beer pong or something like that, right? Like the wear on this cup is only where the fingers would go in a cup, like in the inside the handles, and there is no foot to it. So the only interpretation I've seen that accounts for what on earth this was is that it's someone's own special cup that they use for playing this game. So like if you're playing flip cup and you bring your own special cup because it just like the balance is just right and you really like your own cup.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So let me ask you, I'm just curious how you ended up studying this. Did like your parents come see you on Parents Weekend and were like, what are you doing? And you're like, no, I promise this is for research. I swear I'm researching. This is for school.
So I haven't actually even told you about the other kind of drinking game, so these are the like physical drinking games. The kind of drinking game that I started originally working on, I was taking a class on Greek lyric poetry. And so, you get a lot of like love poems and other kinds of poetry, but there's also, we have these things called scholia, and they go with a game called the Scholian game. And this is the place where I think a lot of our scholarship is wrong. Like pretty much everybody more or less agrees about how you would throw things at targets and stuff. It's messy and it's wacky, but there's not a lot of debate about that. It's actually this like verbal kind of drinking game that's more showing off your cleverness, your wit, how well read, or how I would say a modern comparison when I've tried to test play how I think this game worked with people, I have them use like song lyrics for it. But so basically we have a bunch of these little 4-line poems that they say are scholia. And then we have authors from way after when this game was being played. So this would be like me explaining what, I don't know, like a drinking game from the 1600s is like I might not really, yeah, actually that's not bad in terms of years. So basically our explanations say there's 3 types of songs that people sing at parties. The first one, everybody sings it all together. The second one is you have a song, but like I'll sing a little bit and then I give it to you and you sing a little bit and then the person next to you sings a little bit. And then the third one, which only the most clever party guests even play. Most people sit this one out People who think they're really clever play this last one, which is called Scolion. And it's Scolion, this is like the root of scoliosis, like means crooked, which can by extension mean like difficult. Like if a path is very crooked, it's hard to traverse. And so either it's called that because it's the most difficult kind, or it's called that because it's crooked. And I'll explain how the crookedness would work. But basically, the game sort of bounces around the room. And so I would sing a bit of a song and then I pass it to you, but you're like, you don't know that you're next, right? And that's most of what we have in terms of actual descriptions of this game, which really doesn't make sense of our evidence. And so, like, if these songs are only 4 lines long, how is this such a hard game that I say a line and then like you would have a branch like a talking stick and I would like throw it across the room to you and then you have to pick up from there. But it's not that much harder than just going around the room, right? And so this is all to say my theory for how this worked. This is my forthcoming article one day when I finally decide to sit down and write all this up. Is that so I would lead off with a line from one of these poems, a line from and we have a bunch of little tiny examples of stuff. So I would start and then I pass it off to you and you have to come up with something that can follow that line. So let's say somewhere I like wrote up a whole example of how this might work with modern song lyrics. I'll see if I can do this one on the fly. But something like oh, this is much harder to do on the fly than I thought it was going to be. So let's say I sing the line like "I love rock and roll, put another dime in the jukebox, baby," and then I throw the branch thing over to you, and you have, if you're really boring, you could sing the next line of that song, but that song ended with the word baby, so you could then pick up the baby and say, you know, oh baby, baby, how was I supposed to know? And then you throw it to Steve over here, and Steve can do another Britney Spears song, can do something that picks up on that no, or how was I supposed to know, can do something, right? So, but there needs to be some kind of connection between what I have served up to you as your prompt, and like there needs to be something that connects it. So in this way, like it's a lot closer to when people play King's Cup and like you're in the round of like questions and you have to keep asking each other questions, and the first person who can't has to take a drink. Like it would function much more that way. And so, you know, I think that accounts for a lot of the descriptions about how hard this is. It accounts for a lot of our weird evidence in terms of like the different lines and things. We get like variations of poems. And I think that this has to get really in the woods to explain exactly how this evidence, I think, is proves this. But I think we have a lot of like textual evidence to support this idea of it being much more this type of game. And we have a little bit of stuff from like comedies and a few other examples to kind of suggest that this makes much better sense of the evidence than what a lot of people have suggested before.
Okay, that's interesting. I would be terrible at that because I don't remember a lot of song lyrics. I was hoping you would have said something about ice, and then I could have said, "What's cooler than being cool?" And then I'd have been good. But I thought you would have to play that at like drink 7 to go back to that thing we read earlier, and you're trying to remember the poems because that definitely I could see where it would get hard to remember anything if you're at that level. But I like
Well,
your theory.
yeah, I think like if it is that very basic one, like you have to be so drunk to not be able to remember like a common song. And there's like 25 of these that get recorded for us. And I'm sure he didn't record all of them, but like we have a list of 25 like 4 line poems. How hard is it to know the next line for like 4 lines, right? Whereas I think, yeah, I think this like makes a lot better sense of it. And then part of what I would argue is part of like what makes this game so interesting is that and we have some comedies that I think kind of support this. If it depends how we read jokes and comedies, but I do think I have some evidence, even though I'm also kind of making a lot of this up wholesale, that there's an aspect of it that's really meant to be banter. like it's meant to be like kind of talking shit in a way. And so like if if you set me up with a particular line, like I may want to spin that to be something that insults somebody, right? Brings up that one time that Steve passed out outside the taverna last week or whatever, right? And if you're really good, if you're really clever, and if we think about something like Whose Line Is It Anyway, right, where they're really quick on their feet with lines and with thinking about things and improvising, um, it it allows you to, if you can meet all the criteria of this game, right? You got to come up with a song, you got to have something, you got to do it quickly because they threw it to you. It's your turn, eyes on you. You're getting stressed because everyone's looking at you, and you can turn that into a zinger. Like that's the really like that's the gold standard. That's the part that makes you look so cool at the party in front of everybody, and all the people who aren't playing are like clapping and whooping it up for you because you got them so good. Like that was such a good burn. And like we have versions of this like playing the dozens or like rap battle like a cipher. Like it is not that different, right? Where you're kind of like I give you some words and then there's something like kind of rhymes kind of whatever, and then like I give it to you and now it's your turn to see what you can do with it, and you get to show how clever you are and how good of an insult you can turn that into. Is kind of, and like then you get into a whole dynamic of like, let's say I get you so good, like I bring up let's say I bring up the time that you passed out outside the taverna and everyone's laughing at you, but you're like yeah, I know that was pretty embarrassing, right? Like you take it on the chin. um you look fine, like you're in on the joke, you're laughing about it. Whereas if you overreact to that, if you're like, oh, I'll kill you and try and come punch me for that, like you kind of look bad. Like you look like you can't take a joke, assuming I didn't really cross the line to like make fun of your mother who just died or something, right? Like there's something that's too far. But assuming that I don't go too far, like there's also this element of showing that you can dish it out, but you can take it as well. And we actually have some stories that are preserved of people who like tried to go like sue somebody about something they'd said at a party, and like everyone recognizes like this is ridiculous behavior. Like you look like it's not that different from Drake trying to sue Kendrick over song lyrics. Like you got owned publicly and you're making it so much worse because now you're trying to sue about it. Like you look doubly worse. And so like I think this is another aspect that's really cool about these drinking games, is that it's a chance to show how clever you are. It's a chance to show like that you can laugh at yourself, you can do all of this stuff. And they would have been, I think they would have been pretty, like we're not getting a lot of different social classes in one party. It would have been pretty like homogenous social classes. Like either it's all elites or it's all lower class or middle class or soldiers or women, but there's not a ton of diversity among the people at a given party. Which means that you have like, imagine, I don't know, the Senate is having a drinking party, right? And so like you're trying to be fun and chatty, but you're also getting drunk. And now you're trying to like be able to give people a hard time, but not too hard of a time. And there's a lot of like jockeying for status, and like you need to save face if someone insults you too much, but you don't want to be like the baby who goes, makes a big scene out of something that wasn't worth making a big deal out of. And so like there's all of this kind of jockeying for status and position that's happening in the context of, also we're getting drinking or we're drinking, we're having a good time, we're throwing things at targets. Like, so anyway, it is actually that part that got me into this originally, is the like all of those dynamics. But then because I started working on that, I learned about other drinking games, which I also think are very fun and silly. So that was a very long answer to your question, but that's
That's okay. I thought you were going to dodge the fact that your parents came down and were like, "Why are we sending you here and paying for this?" But what I
this
mean.
was not until grad school. So
Oh,
they,
even
yeah.
worse, right? Got it.
So this was a paper that I wrote for a seminar in grad school.
Okay.
That at that point, my parents were no longer paying for things, so they were less concerned about why I was studying drinking.
Well, okay. So on,
For research, I have to go drink wine, Mom. It's for research.
I have to go to this dive bar again. Leave me alone. I have to see more people keep it real so I can talk to people about Odysseus.
Yeah, I'm doing anthropology, okay?
You know
I
what?
have to go get drunk at dive bars for anthropology.
This has inspired me. The T Public store that we have, I don't do Canva, it's not my thing, but I'm going to
Mhm.
ask my wife to Mrs. Classical Antiquity Sidequest to put together a Odysseus keeps it real thing.
I think you would sell a lot of those.
That's what we're gonna go with because he keeps it real. But give us a good book recommendation. You can't say you didn't know this was coming because
I
it
know.
came up last time.
I know, and I didn't
So
know it was coming then, and I don't have. Does it have to be related to what we talked about today,
no,
or
it
just
can
like
it can be
anything?
about any book. I'm reading a book now called Jesus Saves, which I bought because the person who wrote it was from Roanoke, and it has nothing to do with antiquity. And you know what? I'm enjoying it. I'm having a great time. So just go with anything.
Okay. So, and I'm double checking the author's name because it's going to be very embarrassing to get it wrong. Okay. So it's a book called Glorious Exploits that I just finished. It is by Ferdia Lenin, and it is the cover of the book is delightful. It has like a ancient Greek statue, sort of with big googly eyes on it, like a bust with big googly eyes. And
Googly
it,
eyes makes everything better.
yeah, and it is basically it's set in a very tiny little story related to the Peloponnesian War. That there were people, Athenians, who were saved from the mines after the Sicilian expedition. They like lose badly, and that knowing lines of Euripides like saved people from death in the mines. And it's just a fun little fact that classicists, people who work on tragedy love to talk about, that like studying theater could save your life one day. But it's this historical fiction that's kind of all set like in Sicily, like people who live in the city, they've just defeated the Athenians and they've got this quarry full of Athenian prisoners. And these two young men decide to put on a production of Euripides with basically whichever of the Athenian citizens can kind of remember lines if they like went to the play or they were in the play, they were in the chorus, they were whatever. And they're trying to mount this production. And I just thought it was really interesting. It's set in a time period like it's very much probably appeals more to classicists who have some idea about like Euripides and stuff, but it's also just a really fun historical fiction novel. And I've been trying to read more. Um, I did just read, like for work reasons, Sarah Bond, who's an ancient historian, has a book called Strike. And I did just read that because I was reviewing it for a journal. In terms of nonfiction, that would definitely be a recommendation. I thought it did such a nice job of working with scant evidence to help us think about the places where we might see sort of working like workers, laborers, resisting withholding their labor. Like, I don't know if we can call it a union. I mean, people debate a lot. Like, when can you start calling things unions? Like, is it medieval guild system? Is it this? Is it that? But she looks at these really like interesting situations where like gladiatorial familia and how they structure themselves and how that helps with revolts and the Spartacus stuff. And anyway, I also really liked that. And I think it walks a really nice line of doing ancient history in a publicly accessible way, but also inviting you to make connections with modern dynamics around labor. So I guess I kind of cheated, but those would be my two. One
That's
fiction, one nonfiction.
no, that's okay. You're not the first person to mention Strike, and I hope more people mention Strike because then I can tag her Blue Sky account on the post for this episode. And since she also has Roanoke ties, as I found out recently,
Oh,
she should definitely come on the podcast because Roanoke is great, one, and two, um, labor history is awesome. So is always a good thing to
It's
talk about.
well, and one of the things that I mean, I wrote a lot of this in my review, which hasn't come out, but it will be soon. But thinking about more possibilities. I don't know if you've read Kim Kelly's book, Fight Like Hell. I also really enjoyed that. That's about like modern US labor history. But it helps us imagine other ways that things could be, right? Like thinking about like we don't know for sure what was happening in the Roman organized, however organized the labor was. Like there's a lot of stuff that she's like, here's like we don't know for sure, but here are possibilities that are available that we haven't really thought about as much. Like let's explore those. And I think that idea of expanding our historical imagination, like getting us to consider things that we haven't thought about before because our perspective has been too limited, I think is just such a valuable thing. Like if we can imagine other ways that history, that the present could could be, I think that's the first step to getting there is that like here are moments of resistance, here's moments of organizing, here's moments of unification, of solidarity, class solidarity in time periods like some of them failed. Kim Kelly's book talks a lot about like things that don't necessarily work or things that go wrong. But it also, I think, helps us craft a different story about what labor can do. Like there's more, people have tried more and tried different things and had small wins in different ways than we maybe knew about. And I think that really helps people imagine a different future. If things could have been different in the past, why can't they be different in the future, right?
And there's a reason there is a book called From the Folks Who Brought You the Weekend, which is about the labor movement and what it accomplished. One of my history professors recommended that book highly. I don't think I actually ever read it, but it does remind you about how important the labor movement is and was and has been to the world that we have now. So just keep that in mind. Now, one last thing to ask you about future podcast episode. Give us a good recommendation or a suggestion.
Um, for a topic for anybody, like not like a thing I want to talk to you about or a
If
thing
you
for anybody.
if you want to talk about it and come back on, that helps me tremendously. Because I owe somebody a reply. I've been this week that we're recording this, I've been on the road a lot, or the train track actually a lot. So I owe some people some emails about coming on the podcast, but it is easier if I have a recurring stable of folks who want to come back on.
Um, so yeah, I mean there are absolutely things. I would say one thing that I don't think you've had her on before, Debbie Sneed. So she works on disability in the ancient world. And I think it's stuff that has really, it's an area that's really moving forward a lot recently, because there's all of these sort of myths about how Spartans would throw disabled children off the cliff and disabled like this and this idea that like it wouldn't have been a nice place to be disabled in the ancient world. But also like when we think about how many war veterans who would have been injured and like there's actually a pretty high population of disabled people that would have been in Athens. And there's always just kind of been this talking point about like ancient Greeks hate disabled people. And she's been doing some work to reconsider that and seeing how there seems to be ramps on temples that would have been used for construction, but then it seems like they kept them, um, which would have been, I mean, the only real reason to keep them there is as a disability thing, like people with limps, with mobility concerns, like could go into temples. And I think she's done some really cool work on the topic that she's an archaeologist. She works on the Agora in Athens. And I think it's just a really cool area that there were so many places once I started. One of my students wrote a senior thesis that engaged with a lot of a lot of her work. And the number of places where like it doesn't actually say that in Homer. Like we've just made assumptions about what something means in Homer about it. Like there's a beginning of book one of the Iliad, like Hephaestus is running around like making people laugh. And we just assumed that they're laughing at his limp. but it doesn't actually say that. And there are other ways of reading things. And like just the number of little places where I've had to rethink interpretations that like people told me, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense, and I just moved on with life. And so anyway, I think that would be a really cool, that's a place where I'm on sabbatical this fall, and so I'm like thinking about where I want to do more reading, that and kind of get myself up to speed on some things, and that's definitely one of the places. There's also some really so I thought I didn't like military history just because like I don't like battle details that much. Like I'm not one of those people that knows like every single like what happened at Antietam day by day, moment by moment. That's never been my jam. But there is some really cool work about things that happen in the military, like Roman military stuff. And that's the other big topic that over my sabbatical I would really like to learn more about, like how organization, how resistance, how identity, like when you have a ton of soldiers who are away from their home, and thinking about does the army always like to go along with what they are supposed to be doing? Are there times where, especially this actually came up in Strike, but the idea that the army is being told to attack the like slave revolts, the gladiators, Spartacus, things like that, and that like it seems like in some of like the soldiers weren't necessarily cool with some of like their allegiances and their ideological opinions. Like you have a revolt that is structured in a very military fashion, and that the army isn't necessarily 100% on board with squashing this rebellion.
That reminds me of a scene in the South Park movie. If you've seen it, I think you all know what I'm talking about, where Chef is concerned about the plan that's been drawn up and who's going to be the operation in Operation Human Shield.
Yeah, it took me a second to know what scene you were talking about, but
Right.
yes.
I'm, if I get more than that, if I go more than that, I think I'll get canceled. So I'm not going to say what he says, but you can figure it out when it's called Operation Human Shield, and Chef is who
Mhm.
Chef is.
Yeah.
So, I okay, those are good topics. I like that. That I have a lot of stuff to watch now. This is good. It's good.
I will like also, I mean there's I will follow up if I probably do you play video games much?
My life is spent at work, at my kids' sporting events, and then yard work. So sadly, no.
No. Okay. Um I've been, you know, I've been thinking a lot more about how games and education work together. So we're putting together a panel for an upcoming conference. It's going to be about like when you first encounter history through, people have done this a lot more with movies, but like if the first thing you learn about Roman history is Gladiator, like what, let's talk about like is it good for teaching history when we have movies that like it's a blockbuster and it's not like 100% accurate, but it like, how does all of that work? And um but yeah, I've been because a lot of my students come into classes because they played Total War Rome, or they played whatever Greco-Roman historical video game. And so
Assassin's Creed has stuff like
mhm,
that. Okay.
yeah. And so like I've been thinking more about like how playing like how games interact with learning, because like there's a phenomenon, like if you, I don't know, go back to, I don't know, like Donkey Kong or something, and you miss the jump, you like try it again and you try it again and you try it again. um there isn't that same motivation when you like bomb a test or you fail the bar exam or whatever it is, of like I want to do this again, not like give me another shot at it, not like oh god damn it I have to do this again, but like I want to do it again because I'm going to get it right this time. And so like I'm really fascinated with, is there a way to transfer that way of thinking of like give me another shot. Like I know we lost to that team this week, but like oh man, if I see if we get him again, if we get him in the playoffs or in the whatever, like man we're going to get him. Like that's like any sort of competitive context, like it's not even competition, but anyway, this has nothing to do with anything. It's just something I was like if I ever get my thoughts in any kind of coherent order, that's something that I would like to start working on. And I, would love an opportunity to talk more about it. But also there's like we at one point I remembered what we were originally going to talk about from back when you wanted to talk about something having to do with like sex and gender. There was something you wanted to talk about.
Probably, yes. I can't remember exactly, but I do like what you were, and I'm not saying that's not a good topic. That is something that and we do explore it, if not per episode, like an episode dedicated to it. I think we do cover that here on the podcast. But I do like your idea of video games and would like to talk to you about that. We'll see if we stick to that because we may just go into something else. So let's get that on the books at some point. And then hopefully we'll be able to have you back and come back on the podcast.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I always have so much fun talking to you about stuff. So this was a lot of fun. I know your schedule's been super busy. So yeah, thank you for I'm glad we finally found a time for this to work.
Oh, me too. Me too. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And for the audience out there, if you want to stay in touch with us, go to the website, classicalantiquitypod.com. You can find us on pretty much all the socials at antiquitypod. If you want to get on the podcast, call, leave a voicemail, ask a question. I'll do my best to answer it. Maybe I'll have the guest answer it. We'll see. 540-632-0160 is the number to call. Got more episodes coming. As you know, I have to keep doing this because the Classical Antiquity Sidequest is a podcast without end.